How many of you work? Raise your hand. How many of you wish your job were more flexible? How many of you feel satisfied with your current job? Hi, my name is River Horner, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk presentation. My research question is, how can one see generational shifts in attitudes towards work and life? There are very few people in the world who are lucky enough to love their jobs and want to get up and go to work every day. To give some perspective on this, a statistic provided by Kilsican states that 85% of employees worldwide admit to hating their jobs when surveyed anonymously. This is an insane amount of people worldwide who feel dissatisfied with their jobs. And if you are within this 15% that feels satisfied with your job, that is amazing. You are so unbelievably lucky. But this 15% is a really sad number. 100% of people should feel satisfied with your jobs, but this is a very difficult thing to do. This same author also reported that 81% of employees consider leaving their jobs due to job dissatisfaction. Shouldn't everyone love their jobs and have the mindset, I get to go to work today, I get to do this? But has anyone ever stopped to consider why this is not the case? Why jobs are not appealing to every generation? Finally, younger generations entering the workforce, including myself, are beginning to question this. To get started, I looked into the 4 current working generations, so baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, and Generation Z. Baby boomers were born from 1946 to 1960, Generation X was born from 1961 to 1980, Generation Y, also known as millennials, was born from 1981 to 1995, and Generation Z are the newest generation to begin entering the workforce, born after 1995 to 2010. I wanted to discover why there has been minimal change in the workplace expectations and why it is not appealing to every generation. Now, this may be an obvious answer. There are still archaic employee expectations within companies. And these older expectations mean older values, older beliefs, and the mentality behind a 9-to-5 job. And these are all concepts that we are still implementing into our current workforce as well as participating in. Mind you, these concepts were created 98 years ago, so almost a century old. Spectrum News 1 claims that in 1926, Henry Ford adopted a 40-hour work week for his automobile assembly workers a decade before Congress actually mandated it. It is apparent that there will always be a difference between generations. Someone born in the 1950s is going to have a different upbringing than someone born in the 2000s. And this is also known as a generation gap, which I will get a little bit more into later on. Of course, they're going to have different values and beliefs, and yet these old-fashioned ideologies are still controlling our workforce today. So what did I look into and why? I looked into the lack of change in work cultures, particularly as a Gen Zer, where I've observed both myself and peers feeling disenchanted and overall unhappy with business cultures and work environments. And this brings me to my first claim. The 9-to-5 job is not appealing to younger generations because organizations are not changing their criteria. And if you don't know what a 9-to-5 job is, it is any job that equates to 40+ hours a week. And it's not so much that organizations are not trying to change, it's just that companies are very ill-equipped to integrate the incoming generations, particularly Generation Z. And this makes sense because corporate culture has been around for generations, making it more challenging to change. And if you don't know what corporate culture is, it basically means the beliefs and behaviors that determine how companies, management, and employees all interact together. You can have good and bad corporate culture, but a bad corporate culture can breed burnout, high turnover, and people just not showing up to work, which is not something that you would want to achieve. Hines states that a negative workplace culture also often means outdated work policies that are easy on the company budget but tough on employees' lives. So why are we still incorporating these outdated ideas and values into our corporate culture? Well, to start off, baby boomers and Generation X have a very different way of doing things in the corporate world compared to Generation Y and Z. Dillman explains that baby boomers' corporate culture is very different than that of Gen Y and Z's because boomers are motivated by status and prestige, and they define success as long work weeks and long hours, as well as professional accomplishments in the office. Their workaholic ethic is how they show commitment, so when they see Generation Y and Generation Z valuing this work-life balance, they see them as showing a lack of commitment and a poor work ethic. And I will get into these workaholic tendencies from baby boomers a little bit more later on. Dillman also claims that because Generation X is the closest generation to baby boomers, they often mimic baby boomers with little change or resistance to the ideas and norms that boomers have put forth. So now transitioning from the discussion on corporate culture and organizational adaptation, let's now focus on work-life balance. More specifically, my second claim. Younger generations prioritize a work-life balance more than older generations. Dillman states that the baby boomer generation is having a difficult time adjusting to the flexibility that organizations are beginning to trend towards. And this shift to the new idea of a corporate culture is difficult for boomers to wrap their heads around and adjust to. While baby boomers may have also valued a good work-life balance, they certainly did not prioritize it, being nicknamed the workaholics. Now you're probably wondering, why should I care? Well, we should care because in less than 15 years, a large majority of the workforce will be millennials and Gen Z. Not even that, but by 2025, so next year, 75% of the global workforce will be millennials and Generation Z, who will be largely prevalent within the employment sector by that time. They are literally the future of the workforce, and we need to learn to accommodate their needs, such as a better work-life balance initiative. Ballou supports this information, claiming a job that makes Generation Z happy and satisfied with flexible working hours is one of the components of a successful career. Since they give importance to work-life balance compared to their parent who sacrifices themselves by ignoring the engagement of social activities and their health conditions for the sake of working. Amidst the struggles faced by baby boomers and Generation X in adjusting to the growing flexibility, it's essential to recognize that this isn't merely a matter of life stages, but that it's actually a genuine shift in workplace dynamics. So let's talk about life stages. First off, you need to understand two things: life stages and generation gaps. Life stages are the ages that we go through from infancy to adulthood. And generation gaps are the differences in thoughts and actions between younger generations and older generations. These generation gaps and life stages are important because, now this may seem obvious and I touched on it a little bit before, but children growing up in the 1950s were exposed to a fundamentally different culture than children growing up in, say, the 1990s or the 2000s. For example, World War II, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the Shuttle Challenger disaster, the attacks on the World Trade Center, and COVID are all events and examples that represent significant common experiences that have shaped the traits of each generation differently. And this is important because each generation experienced a different history and culture during their formative years, thus shaping their values and belief systems. And this gives background into why Generation Z is now demanding change. Now this is very crucial because it allows for conversation surrounding the question as to whether or not this is a real shift or is it a life stage. If we interviewed baby boomers at the same age as a 20-year-old Gen Z, would they say the same thing? The answer is no. Claiming that this is not a real shift, but rather a life stage implies that every generation prior to now demanded change in work culture, and that is just not the case, because the evidence is in the actions of baby boomers. If it was a life stage and not a real shift, boomers would have made it a priority and it would have been changed by now. Therefore, these differences from past generations indicate that this is not a life stage problem, but rather a real shift. And this has caused and will continue to cause intergenerational issues within the workplace. For example, baby boomers finding Generation Z lazy until we do something about it. Understanding the impacts of life stages and generation gaps is key. Each generation experiences shape their values differently. For Generation Z, growing up in a world hugely surrounded by technology impacts how they're going to approach work in the future. And this leads me to my fourth and final claim. Growing up in a world of newly found technology has a direct impact on Generation Z's future work habits and how they view the modern world compared to previous generations. Technology plays a pivotal role in shaping the characteristics of Generation Z. Maioli states that being born into a fully digitalized world, social networks and technology are integrated into their lives. And due to such easy access to the internet, Generation Z have more concern for the challenges the modern world faces, such as inequality, poverty, climate change, etc., compared to other generations. And because of this, they are more self-expressive and open to change. Not only that, but Generation Z's tech-savvy upbringing and awareness of global issues can greatly affect how they will see a work-life balance. Their comfort with technology and concern for societal issues lead them to seek jobs outside of work that will let them obtain this personal and work-life balance. Now let's shift gears and see how COVID-19 has spread up the use of technology in our lives and the unexpected perks that it's brought along. COVID has played a big role in the advancement of technology, and it is now very prevalent for people to work from home and want to, for that matter. This new shift has led many to drift away from wanting to work a 9-to-5 job because it's much less time-consuming and so easy to work from home. A statistic provided by, and excuse my pronunciation, Bhatia and Mote mentions that 80% of individuals enjoy and prefer work from home because numerous employees were freed from long drives, travel expenses, and they have discovered more gainful ways to invest that energy. And they also appreciated maintaining flexibility in a work-life balance. Now, this specific article did not mention the preferences of each generation and how they feel on this. However, Deloitte states, as more jobs shifted to remote work during the COVID-19 crisis, many millennial and Gen Z employees experienced flex work for the first time in their careers. As of May 2020, this shift to remote work had largely been viewed positively by employees, with more than 60% of the younger generations saying they would like the option to work remotely after the crisis. And although many benefits come with the rise of technology, there are also many downsides that come with it. Many wonder, has the rise of technology caused this group to be more lazy? Well, smartphones and related technologies aren't actually boosting mental abilities. They're actually harming our capacity to think, remember, focus, and control our emotions. Daily multitasking makes it tougher for people to stay on top of their cognitive resources. And this is contradictory to my thesis statement because these younger generations are so connected to these little gadgets here that it's so easy for them to get distracted and lose focus, which in turn affects their work-life balance. And by constantly switching between your phone and work, it can begin to blur the line between personal and professional time, making it much harder to maintain a healthy work-life balance. And this is different from previous generations who didn't grow up with smartphones and related technologies, so they didn't have the same level of constant digital distractions all the time. Nevertheless, numerous factors indicate that the work priorities of younger generations differ significantly from those of older generations, leading to a shift from the desire to work longer hours. So many of you now may be wondering, what's the point? Why should I care? Well, because these younger generations, such as millennials and Generation Z, are less interested in the current 9-to-5 workday, they are much more likely to switch jobs. And this is different to baby boomers who didn't typically embrace the idea of changing jobs, and they believed strongly in company loyalty. However, current trends show that 21% of Generation Y have switched jobs within a year, which is 3 times those outside of Generation Y. Additionally, 60% of them express willingness to seize new opportunities at better companies. Because these younger generations are constantly changing their jobs, it is costing the U.S. economy $30.5 billion a year. And this is only in the U.S. Imagine how much money it is costing the world. That cost could be mitigated if organizations analyzed their generational shift in the workplace and adjusted their benefit and compensation packages to be tailored to the wants and needs of the upcoming workforce. Moreover, with 60 million Generation Z workers entering the job market, addressing their preferences becomes increasingly important for future work planning. Ultimately, as we navigate the complexities of the modern workforce, it is imperative to recognize that the future of work is not static, but rather dynamic. It is shaped by the collective aspirations and actions of each generation. With the changing workforce, companies need to adjust their culture too. In conclusion, change is difficult, especially attempting to adapt a workplace culture that has been around as long as anyone can remember. But tailoring benefits to suit the preferences of Generation Y and Generation Z is not only a necessity, but it is crucial in order to accommodate all generations and their needs. Thank you.